I am so excited to be bringing you this video, Hibiscuses. It truly is so inspired by the fact that astrologically we are in the downfall of colonialism. And one thing I want this video to do is deeply motivate you into taking action and appreciating you have the talents and skills that you do for a reason. Look at it like this. Too often, we think the only people who will be capable of activism, resistance, ushering in changes, fighting back are politicians, or essentially what I would call deeply inadequate public figures. For some reason, we never think it could be us, when that's the furthest thing from the truth. It will be the artists, it will be the different teachers, the farmers, the cooks, the healthcare professionals, the athletes. And that's why I thought I would kick off this series with Bad Bunny. So if you've been following me for a long time on TikTok, you know I speak openly about the downfall of the American empire. And for a really long time, I kept getting these weird insights and feelings about essentially Boriken. And I felt so nervous because I was like, what the fuck could I talk about meaningfully when it comes to the Boricuas and their journey to freedom? And then slowly but surely it started clicking. And I kept thinking about this TikTok that I made way ages ago where I said, oh, Bad Bunny's going to get more political. And I think we're going to see him mature and start talking about stuff that we're not really used to hearing coming out of his mouth. So then as I see everything lining up, I was like, oh, he's going to become such a big pivotal figure in that independence movement. And what you see with this young man over the next 30 years, there is no reason you equally for your people and your causes could not do the same. So you know the routine. Grab a cup of cha, get comfortable. Let's have a candid cosmic chit chat about how Bad Bunny is going to be a key figure when it comes to the independence of Boriken, which will definitely be successful within the next 30 to 40 years. Let's go. So many of you keep messaging me, asking me about readings. So I wanted to give you a reminder that, look, you don't always have to pay for a reading. I have other platforms that you can follow along to understand basically what the transits mean for us as a collective or an individual. So number one, feel free to go to my TikTok or Instagram page where I post daily content to walk you through what the fuck these current events are, how the stars align, and maybe best how to navigate that time. So the usernames are Carefree Brown Girl for both those platforms. Number two, if you're interested about learning about Vedic astrology, perhaps in a more detailed and intimate way, and you would actually like to know how these transits affect you as an individual in the long term, whether it's months or years, I have a Patreon page, same username, Carefree Brown Girl, that you can always feel free to join and get involved in the community and begin your education like that, I suppose. And thirdly, if you do feel called for a reading with me, no problem. I have a website called cultivate.co.uk. Go to the personal readings page. I have a plethora of different options. You might have to be patient with me because currently I do have a lot of people booked in for readings, so timings are quite hard, but I always try and make space for everybody. Whatever floats your boat, go towards that. Other than that, let's get back to our regular programming. Boricuas, I wanted you to know that I believe really deeply in the power of words. So I want to speak these words over this video. So not only do you understand like everything's coming from a sincere and honest place, but your independence journey has really begun. So, se acabaron las promesas. The promises are over. You don't need them anymore. You will create your own destiny and it will be a beautiful one. Let's get into it. If you're new to Vedic astrology, keep these three things in mind. So whenever you watch a birth chart video by me, it's a little bit easier to follow along. So number one, there's 108 star signs, not 12. So even some people think 27 nakshatras covers all the signs. Inside each nakshatra, 4 different versions of that star sign exist, right? Number two, there's actually 20 birth charts that symbolize any person, any country, and sometimes anything. So astrology for us is a religious practice. Not only do we see the experiences that God has written over your life, but as you go through those experiences, we see how it changes you from your approaches in relationships to career, all of that jazz, right? So never ever think of yourself as just one thing. You are naturally multifaceted. You are made up of different types of karmas, and all that diversity, all those nuances are captured in that chart. And you'll learn that throughout this series too. And thirdly, people change star signs and even countries change star signs over time. So the reason for that is there's this journey of immature self and mature self. And for us, that change basically signifies how successfully or how stably someone is kind of growing into the best version of their soul. And if they're, we'll say, on the right path or maybe a little bit led astray. And it's really okay if you didn't know any of this. Look, due to colonialism, due to whitewashing, due to cultural appropriation, due to fascism, a lot of that detail even gets missed out in our astrology, let alone like the wider world's understanding. But other than that, welcome to the side of liberation. I'm very happy to have you. Let's start analyzing Bonito. My ADHD ass made so many notes. So we're going to begin by looking at Bonito's Rasi chart. So if any of you are new around here, the Rasi chart symbolizes two big things. So number one, it's your cosmic blueprint. It contains a lot of your dominant life experiences and does such a fabulous job of explaining the purposes behind you going through those experiences. Now, the other side of it is what we call the chart of immature self. So look at it like this, right? Our astrology is quite deeply a religious practice, right? So the way that we think about God, the cycle of reincarnation, free wills, different types of karmas, the soul, that heavily influences the way that we're looking at people's charts and even them as a person. So as you can imagine, life for us is very intentional. We feel like you've come to do something, right? So in one regard, that's how we see the raw versions of your talents, your skills, your behavioral traits, and the best way to use them, engage with them, learn different things, expand your horizons, all of that, right? Because again, no one becomes ready-made, and sometimes they just need a helping hand in terms of understanding what paths are the best for them to flourish in. And likewise, right? For everyone, there's a certain amount of discipline required in life. So the reason we also call it immature self is because it captures behavioral patterns, habits that essentially are not your friend. They're holding you back, right? It will highlight your fears and insecurities so we can get you to kind of reflect a little bit deeper, whether subconsciously or consciously you're kind of getting in your own way, and hopefully give you some words of wisdom that make you be able to move past that. And yeah, like thirdly, within reason and hopefully with a lot of comedy, if the moment allows, we can essentially highlight any red flags that we see within you or your existence. And the whole thing is with that side of the reading, it's not to berate anyone. It's to get them to cultivate a sense of self-awareness, accountability, consciousness. So as you move and grow through life, you learn to pick environments, people, choices, habits, philosophies that age well, as opposed to keep you stuck in a cycle or like worse circumstances that truly are beneath many people, right? Now, let's begin by analyzing Bad Bunny's Lagna. So that's the ascendant, right? So the ascendant's always really important because not only does it contextualize the chart and really set the tone for everything else that we're seeing, but one thing you'll find is as we go through this reading, the rising signs themes repeat itself in everything else that we see. So it really is that red string that pulls everything together. Bonito's rising sign is a sign called Rohini. That is Taurus, type 4 to 7. Now, Rohini in English means the red one. So it can symbolize someone who's playful, passionate, patriotic. But also because we believe in free will, if this sign, has moments where it lets itself down, It can show someone who is short-tempered, perhaps a little prone to making not the smartest decisions in love, and sometimes their emotions can take over them quickly, causing them to make impulsive decisions that, again, don't really age well. The other thing I want to point out about Rohini is it often will have this kind of imagery of a diamond in the rough. A lot of Rohinis are born into circumstances that actually are not that glamorous. Now that's because it's Shakti, aka the power, is the power to grow. So for you to see the true might of Rohini, it's seen in the individual's journey. So again, Benito comes from really humble circumstances. He comes from a household where the father, I believe, was a truck driver, the mother was a retired teacher, and it's super, super working class, right? And he always emphasizes that he was taught the power of hard work, humility, and most importantly, community. And again, you've got to think about Benito's journey to go from being a Puerto Rican kid in the north side of Puerto Rico where, vibrant, but in terms of flourishing economic success and prosperity, to see someone achieve that through the arts and the way and at the level that Benito has, it's unthinkable, it's unimaginable, but that's the beauty of Rohini. It's the power to grow. The other thing I thought was really funny when I was looking at it is when you look at Rohini, this idea of like they're big time lovers, right? And I was thinking, well, when we were first introduced to Bad Bunny, the thing that captivated us all was essentially how his songs captured the heat of what romance feels like at any age, right? And how we, when we get in our feelings, we want to speak our shit. I was even looking at like his earlier stuff. So his first single that really struck big was Soy Peor. And essentially in that song, I'm going to say in English because I do not want to embarrass myself. The language translates into, go your own way. Without you, I'm better. Now I have other women who do me better. If I was a son of a bitch before, now I'm worse. Now I'm worse. Now I'm worse because of you. So Rohini's desire is the desire to be united with their soulmate. So the likes of Angelina Jolie, Lauryn Hill, they're also Rohini individuals. Hell, even Rihanna is a Rohini individual. So what you see in Rohini individuals, it's really funny because surface level, these are very confident, independent, I would say pretty like self-reliant, self-enjoying people. But at their core, they are deep, deep romantics. But Rohini's unique karmas often are about maturing in love, right? So again, when we care for someone, because you've got to remember, Rohini is the red one, right? So when they care, they're all in it. The thing is, even with Rohini, it's really funny because you have two extremes. So when they want someone, because it's associated to Brahma, and Brahma essentially falls in love with his own creations, and when he wants something, he'll relentlessly pursue it. Rohinis have that heat in them, regardless of their genders, right? And I think even Benito, there are stories about him, like, women have been, like, taken and all of that. And he's like, but you're the love of my life. Like, I need you. I'm in it to win it, right? And I'm just like, well, that is the red one's energy, is it not, right? And then likewise, it talks about the desire to also feel held and wanted and with someone in that regard. But it comes at a little bit of a price when they're young, right? It's kind of teaching the person how to understand what healthy love is. And sometimes when we feel that kind of passion, it's not because the love is that divine or that oomph. It's actually coming from a place of fear and insecurity. So they take some time to understand those differences. And sometimes it can feel like losing yourself. And then only when things have got really, really bad, realizing how much that person has derailed you. And then you come back to self. And again, if you look at a lot of Benito's early music, Mr. Loverboy definitely shows us the heights of when you want someone and you're pining from them, the heat of being with them, and then, you know, unfortunately, because it's just that, it's heat, it's not love, when we get burnt and all of a sudden we realize it's not as sexy as it was, it kind of switches on how much that person has ruined us. And then, you know, then the claws come out. The other thing I was thinking about, think about his first album, right? Mia was one of his biggest hits globally. I think that went into like a few 100 million streams, if not more, right? The chorus always had me so gagged. I'm going to translate in English because there's no need to embarrass myself any further with my terrible Spanish. But he goes, the chorus is, tell him you're mine, mine. You know you're mine, mine. You said it yourself when we're doing it. And I'm just like, this is so Rohini coded. Because like, again, it's that thing of like, I love. And also, because the thing is, Rohini is generally that romantic because it has two big kind of scriptures that it's associated to. So number one, the ruling planet of this sign is the moon. So somewhat in our religious scriptures, that the original Vedas, before it got all fascist and fucking took over, Soma is essentially the moon god, right? And this is a deity that at one point has 27 brides. So they're not lacking options, honey, right? But the whole thing is, Rohini, who was his favorite bride, is the one that he gets obsessed with, the one that he can't live without. And she's like, it's so different to what Soma's known. So Soma wants to spend all his time with Rohini and no one else, even though he's enjoyed the pleasure of different partners. And then the other people get very, very jealous and essentially try and put leprosy on Soma. So again, in Rohini, you see all the beauty, all the turmoil, all the want. But when you start studying the scriptures deeper and you look at it through a religious lens, it ultimately takes a person back to that real divine love that your soul is craving is found in friendship. And it's not the people that make you lose your mind. It's the people that are steady with you, that stabilize you. And when you're gone, they miss you. And when you're here, they have appreciation for you, but they don't put you in any state of flux. But a Rohini individual has to learn that for themselves. So again, straight off the bat, I was like, oh, Benito has delivered us everything Loverboy coded that's associated to Rohini. But again, Rohini's power is the power to grow. So one thing you'll find is a lot of Rohini individuals, when they're a little bit younger, because Rohini doesn't start blossoming until usually it's about 28, 29. So that doesn't mean success is delayed, but I don't think you see the true power, grit, and substance of these people until they kind of edge towards their 30s. So again, we're used to seeing Bad Bunny through the lens of like, what was that article by Rolling Stones? Didn't they label him like Latin's like freaky king of pop or something, right? And even in that, they emphasize like how his work goes from being like shamelessly sexual and flirty to like so vulnerable and raw. And again, you can see that in a lot of his work, right? But that is not the only part of Bad Bunny. Look at us, right? We've seen him go from being an artist that we blare at our parties, when we're in our fields, when we're throwing down, to someone's music now. And think about how powerful this is. That resonates with so many different marginalized people and their feelings of feeling disconnected to their motherland, fighting for their homes, trying to carve out a culture that isn't so tainted by the older generations who in some ways have failed us because they aligned with the oppressors. Remember, Rohini is the power to grow. So yeah, maybe in their youth, they look a little bit one-track minded, but have faith in the kid, because when they switch on, if they can take that same power to grow when it comes to love, shmoney, artistic expression, which Rohini is so closely linked to, when they take that energy and they put it into liberation, education, creation, what do you think they're capable of? And sometimes, can I say something? A lot of Rohini individuals I know are often looked down upon because they're seen as like immature, like they're just not taken seriously. But one thing I think their competitors and often people who are envious of them don't understand It's in their relatability, in them being their most unfiltered, authentic selves. It has such a charm that even if you weren't looking to learn, you can't but help, but stop, listen, and it just happens to be the words that coming out their mouth are pretty magical. And if we're lucky enough that the Rohini would have a cause or something deeper to speak about, that's one hell of a champion to usher in people to support your causes. And that switch over from lover boy to essentially a big revolutionary figure has a lot to do with Rohini is the birth nakshatra of Sri Krishna. Now, Sri Krishna, if I could put it really casually and playfully, is an incarnation of God who appears in pretty much femboy form. I'm talking about this fruity little man is running around fields full of babes and cows playing a flute. And it's emphasized how much the babes love him. And they love him because he's so different compared to the macho nonsense around them, right? Also, even though Sri Krishna is very gleefully shown as being a little bit naughty, being a little bit alternative, you know, pushing the boundaries and not coming in a form that we expect our leaders and kind of figures of like ethics and good to come in, this is also someone who leads Arjuna through a war against his loved ones. And it speaks about him having the knowledge. I also think the soothingness to help someone understand that sometimes our duty requires doing uncomfortable actions and standing even up against our loved ones. And again, when you contextually think of Boriken and the fact that the liberation in the past has been halted because there have been, the thing is, it's not even that I think they're Borinquas. I think they are essentially sometimes the aftermath of colonizers who've settled in Borinque, and now they have confused themselves with Borinquas. And because they don't understand where they come from and how they've ended up here, they think they have the right to hijack the causes of the Borinquas, right? And I have this very strong feeling that Bad Bunny, give the kid time, but when he really starts finding his voice, you will be surprised how good he is in terms of cleaning up that division and also making people understand, do not fall for these figures because they are aligned with the oppressor, even though they come in forms where we think they're family, they're friends, they're meant to be public figures who are helping us. No, guys, you know? And with that, let's break that down, because think about it. He belongs to the same nakshatra of Sri Krishna. And I think even in the little things I've just told you about Krishna, you can see Benito's personality so vibrantly. So the first point I want to start with is gender fluidity, right? So again, when we see images and we hear stories of Sri Krishna, he is not presenting in such a way where he's big, he's muscly, he has this Herculean figure. It's everything else. He's cute, you know, he's real cute as the scriptures describe, but ultimately he challenges even the kind of the religious perception of what we think strength, defiance, leadership, courage, and confidence is, and that's intentional. So I was thinking a lot about when Bad Bunny first came out, he was so heavily criticized for his fashion, right? And I remember how many, particularly we'll start with like the Latino community. I remember seeing so many like Latino people on social media saying the most out of pocket, homophobic, transphobic shit towards Benito. And because, again, the internet is not a place where nuances are so easily understood, I do think there's a layer because people who were non-Latinos or even non-Caribbeans or Boricuas were seeing like his own people say this stuff. People outside those communities felt even more empowered to essentially say the most hateful shit I have ever seen online, right? And then there was even some people who thought because like he was wearing like the skirts, painting his nails, again, just being expressive in his fashion, he was queer baiting. And for me, this is the first thing. When you study Bad Bunny, you really see this is his first contribution to leading a movement when it comes to decolonizing the culture of Boriken and actively showing you the defiance and what it looks like, right? So think of it like this. When you study Boriken and its history, unfortunately, it is a land and it is a people who have been sacrificed between wars that only are ever against colonizers and colonizers. They have not, for over I think nearly 500 years, been allowed their sovereignty. And literally, whether it's the Spanish colonizers or the American imperialists, everyone was so fixated on owning, puppeteering, controlling the land and the people. They had no regard for the culture, the rich religions, the rich knowledge, the rich history. So let me explain it a little bit deeper. Boriken is essentially made up of what we would call Taino people. They're the indigenous people to the land, right? So they were really gender fluid. They had incredibly expressive natures and different kind of sexualities, different kind of gender expressions. Now, when the Spanish came, who were the first colonizers to plague the land, they essentially forced Taino people to convert to Catholicism. Now, that would have made the Taino people forced to hide their identity, essentially renounce it, or face what I can only describe as really violent, borderline punishment. So that religious pressure of the colonizer trying to convert the indigenous people of Boriken to their religion is the foundation in which we see homophobia, transphobia, all of that begin to build, right? And again, you've got to think about it from their perspective. The Taino people would have been in an incredibly delicate position where it's either save your life or die. And imagine that's in the face of things that are natural to your people, that have been there for centuries beyond these fucking dirty people from other islands invading you have been. And for me, it symbolizes the literal eradication of people who embodied queer, gender fluid expressions. And also these people amongst the Taino people who had those kind of expressions, they were actually hugely influential cultural, spiritual individuals, right? So that means those social roles, that knowledge could not be passed down to future generations. So when I look at Bad Bunny and the gender fluidity, not only is it really native to Rohini's nature, I think, because I have a very strong belief that God is always preparing you for the thing that you are ultimately meant to do or really contribute to. And I think as you're watching Benito grow, I don't know if he's conscious of it or not, but I'm like, baby, your life, by the time it comes to a close, will be one of the most beautiful things when it comes to what it means to resist the colonizers. And often when you look at Boricuas, there's this issue now where they see the Americans more as colonizers. And I think sometimes because the residue of Spanish exploitation, slavery and colonialism has been sitting around for so long, people forget those Spanish settlers are the reason that liberation has still not come. And I think that's the poison that will need to be unrooted and is going to be addressed in the next 5 or 6 years. Because again, Benito speaks to generations ahead of some of the elders who, whether it's through fear, pressure, or perhaps agreeance, have kind of forgot about the cause. But Benito and the generations around him, well, they're going to bring it back, right? So again, what looks like perhaps not a big deal, right? Painting nails, dressing a certain kind of way. When you actually look at the history and the context, right? Again, he is a Boricua. He is a Puerto Rican honey. The whole thing essentially captures the fight for queer rights in Boriken, and it captures the fact that the ability to express your gender, to be your sexuality, is a fight against the colonial legacy, which unfortunately is too motherfucking strong. And again, like, I just think it's funny. I don't know if it's conscious or unconscious, but God moves through you. And that's why I always say, people, trust your gut and intuition, because you'll overthink stuff, but you forget ultimately, like, we also are a vessel for our ancestors and God. Sometimes the things that we love and we get joy in, and especially when it comes to creativity, because the first thing a colonizer will do is hack off your creativity. Because if it hacks off your creativity, it basically hacks off all the parts of you that can resist, that can problem solve, that can defy, right? And again, I really want you to really think about, the Spanish didn't like passively introduce homophobia or transphobia. They actively reinforced it by religious shame. So that would have been the conversions of the Taino people into Catholicism, and then the rest that come. Physical violence. Cannot emphasize how many people were tortured and executed. And thirdly, and I think this is why Bad Bunny is so important, it's a cultural genocide. Let me know if you like a video on cultural genocide, because I definitely think when you look at the artists that we're going to be looking at, because I've got more to share with you, in the era of cultural erasure, in the era of fascism, in the era of like colonialism collapsing, we're in this very delicate moment where it's not just about reclaiming culture, but it's about redefining it outside of the colonial poisons. And excitingly, we're going to be some of the first generations that get to do that successfully, right? And again, think about Bad Bunny. Could you ever imagine thinking him deciding to wear a skirt, to paint his nails, to braid his hair? Oh, the other thing that made me cackle, Rohini is very much associated to like flowers, farming, agriculture. And I was like, oh, my favorite thing is how much Benito loves to pose with flowers and stuff. And I was like, some things just write themselves, right? The other thing I was thinking, right? Because again, Starboard spirituality rots people's brains. I know when like loads of people think of Taurus, they tend to think of like hyper femme, like, I don't know, like just very, I think like off color understandings of Rohini. When I'm like, literally, Rohini is the most gayest non-binary sign of them all, right? And then I was thinking, like, when we're talking about transphobia and homophobia and how it relates, especially to a Boriken man expressing himself the way he is, I really think it also talks about him fighting and challenging like transphobia in a really deep way. Because I was thinking about certain incidences over the years, and I'm like, again, I don't know if he means to do it, but like, this is what I actually think allyship in real time looks like. So number one, right? When he was in tour in Spain, and I think it was when his first album came out, I remember he created a social media video, I think, and basically he was refused service at a nail salon for being a man. And then he literally was like, what year is it? Is it fucking like 1963? Grow the fuck up, right? And then in interviews, I pulled a quote, right? He literally says stuff like this, where he's like, all these people who have so much venom for the way I want to express myself, please know I can always criticize back. I don't want to be fake. I'm just being me, and I have the power to break stereotypes and whatever useless rules that society puts on us. So again, think contextually. We know this is a child of a country that is not recognized as a colony, that has for over 500 years, essentially, I'm going to say it, been enslaved. I think Boriken has not had the freedom it deserves. And I also, and we'll touch on this later videos that I create, I think it's a blessing in disguise you guys are not a state, and it will make more sense in the future. But like, that whole line about the the useless rules that society puts on us is speaking again, maybe it's subconsciously, to breaking away from colonialism. And this is him as a kid. This is him like what, 19, early 20s. That's what I'm always saying. Your purpose works through you. And even if at the time you're doing it and you're unconscious of it, or it seems like it's over superficial situations, God always has a plan. And then I was also thinking, right, there's two videos that I was also really doubling down on. So do you remember the video? I think it's called Yo Pero Solo, right? And I think in that video, he appeared in like drag. And again, there was thing is, when you look at half the people who criticize him and say these really vulgar things, again, this is only from scouring on the internet for like an hour or two. A lot of it is coming from fellow Boricuas, or again, the residual people who lingered on from colonialism, and other like Latinos. A lot of it's internalized, hey. Because look at it this way, and it might be the ancestors working through him. What about you is so disturbed that he, as a Puerto Rican, can so easily express himself and not give fucks and be so happy and joyous. But you, for some reason, who thinks they have to dress in a certain way to be safe, respected, are so annoyed by that. Like, you're fighting internal demons of colonialism. And that's what I mean. Like, as we go through his charts, whether it is intentionally or not, his existence is essentially in many different ways a big middle finger to occupation and all the shit that happens when colonizers have been somewhere for too long and think they are the people and they are the land. And sometimes it's in the way that we exist and express ourselves. It's a nice reminder of who the fuck I am and who the fuck I come from and who you are. So you can cosplay, you can potentially sit here as long as you want, but you could never. That's why you feel uncomfortable, you know? And then likewise, let's talk about the babes, right? Because the babes have a big impact. So again, Krishna's known for essentially always being surrounded by women, right? This is not just like a play on the honeys being available. Rohini, again, is really associated to like women's rights, queer rights, human rights, right? Sri Krishna, he literally it's Vishnu when he reincarnates because the world gets too evil, so he needs to restore like the balance between good and evil. I love it. I fucking love having these conversations, right? So then the second video I want to reference is, again, one of the legacies of colonialism is gender-based violence. The femicide that we see against Boricuas, trans people, especially, I really want to shout out the Afro Puerto Ricans and the Puerto Ricans the Boricuas, who again maybe are richer in tone because they don't come from colonizers who have overstayed their welcome and now are acting like woohoo, fuck off. All the violence the babes face is not natural to the people or the land. It was imported by the Spanish, who essentially needed really intense gender norms and violence against different genders to have their colonial power. And the same goes for the Americans. So he has this video. You have to forgive me. I forgot the name, right? But I think it even might have been a video where that's what it might have been. I think it's a video where he's crying over like leaving an abusive partner, but he gets the girl to play the main character and it shows like the abuse a woman goes through, right? And he released it, I think around a month after Governor Ricardo Rosalia. Basically, there were shitloads of femicides. There still unfortunately is in Boriken, and they just wasn't doing anything about it. And they kept coming up with all this bullshit and basically telling women how they need to police themselves instead of, taking these awful fucking guys and putting their asses in jail and, capital punishment, motherfucker. He literally released a music video empowering the babes and talking about their causes. And I think, again, like, even in the protests they did outside the governor's house. So I think the first or second day they were protesting, they were ignored. They were really poorly treated. And on the third day, I think they were brutalized by the police, or they were like pepper sprayed and beat up. And then he literally, a few weeks after that, put together a music video. And when he, I think, released it on Instagram, he talks about, I think it was something, I'm paraphrasing here. He goes, I'm not sure if cockfighting is abuse, but gender violence against women and the absurd amount of women who are murdered a month is. When are we going to prioritize what really matters? And this is what I mean, like, hibiscuses. You are always born at the time that you are for a reason. You can never look me with a straight face and say, I can't change anything, I can't do anything. Because if that was the case, why would you exist? Because there's only really two roles available in our era of history, right? It is either you will belong to the people who ripped down oppression and rooted out the last few roots of colonialism that poison and hold our communities from flourishing, or you are the oppressor and aligning with the oppressor. And the reason I wanted to use Bad Bunny is because look at this, honeys. This is someone who is like, I'm in my 30s. Benito, I think, is born the same year as me. We often are the most dogged out generation, right? And again, Gen Zs, I feel for you because I think you are inheriting that shit. And unfortunately, people of our generation that forgot how much we were dogged out when we were younger, right? We have inherited, I think, so much. We have inherited debt. We have inherited a culture that has forgot how much it was oppressed, abused. And for some reason, our elders have decided to like assimilate more than carry on our causes, and just a lot of bullshit. And then we're mocked for wanting to be creative and playful and not dream of an office life. But then when you look at everything, isn't it rad? And all the same things that they mock us for and they think are so superficial and dumb and kind of sinful, well, it's the same shit that our ancestors were doing. And respectfully, we have more impact with maybe the kooky creative shit we're doing than you who vote for the lesser of two evils and two political parties. And I also believe God props you up because when time comes for certain things to happen, there's a voice that can reach the masses. And one thing we know about colonizers is they love to silence the voice. Nice, right? So, to summarize, when we analyze Bad Bunny's Lagna of Rohini, yes, whilst initially it will produce a figure who looks playful, is musical, is different, is alternative, when you analyze Rohini more deeply, its playfulness is a defiant act against oppression and essentially someone who is awful. May I remind you, Sri Krishna led a prince through a war that originally he wanted to reject, that made him so nervous, and he was so scared to participate because the war, perception-wise, looked like he was going to be fighting against his loved ones. When in reality, as Krishna reminded him, is number one, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is by design. When I am by your side or I have put you in this position, I have put you to win. Number two, it's an illusion. Do not abandon your causes because the illusion in front of you makes you think you're doing something wrong. Think about when we talk about the structures, the systems, the pressure of colonialism, how it can often make us feel disruptive, weird for wanting our liberation and our freedom and our expression. And I think, thirdly, there's a joy to be had. There is much joy to have when it comes to fighting and revolutions. And it doesn't always have to be scary. You can make it playful. And sometimes things are ultimately bigger than just us and our identity and ego, right? And again, when I look at Rohini, it brings me so much joy because when I think about different types of Rohini, I'll give you examples. Think about what Rihanna has done for the Caribbean islands, right? Think about what Lauryn Hill has done for the experiences, particularly when it comes to African American women. If you want to go deeper, one of the best Rohini placements I ever saw was in Muhammad Ali's chart, right? That guy is a boxer, right? Again, Rohini has a certain level of athleticism to it. You would never think logically a dude who is literally just having like dog fights, getting paid like a nice couple of $100 would then end up being such an articulate voice for civil rights, for Islam, and essentially like dogging out what we know is the propaganda war machine and bloodhounds, aka America. This is what I mean, hibiscuses. In your own unique ways, you are always shaped to deliver something. You just, I don't know, you gotta have that self-belief, that self-value and faith. Rohini is deeply spiritual, which actually leads me to Benito's sun sign. So, in Benito's chart, he actually has 5 planets in different types of Aquarius nakshatras. His sun, which we'll begin with, is also his Amatyakaraka. So Amatyakaraka is essentially your karmic career. It has 2 flavors. So sometimes what it looks like, it's naturally something is our passion and we go towards it. And it's kind of like a holistic life journey and we will naturally flourish in it, right? Then the second flavor is there's a little bit more resistance, there's a little bit more challenges, there's a lot more fear involved, but God has predestined for us to do that work, like whether it's participate in a particular industry or take on a certain role, because it will fortify our karmas. So aka it will involve our personality, if you will, in a way that we haven't been quite able to do in previous lifetimes, right? And again, there also could be a deeper meaning that the work you're engaging in is meant to have like a bigger impact on either that industry or the benefactors of that work. Now, sun being someone's Amatyakaraka is really interesting because number one, it naturally deals with someone being in a position of influence, authority, seniority. But the thing that really came to mind to me is sun symbolizes enlightenment. And I cannot emphasize this enough. There is something so beautiful in terms of Bad Bunny not only just having this magnificent career, but the fact that like God has blessed him enough, or his ancestors have blessed him enough, that through music, he can tell Borinque's story to the rest of the world. Because again, like when I did this series originally on TikTok, I remember like being like, oh my fucking God, what do you mean you're a colony? Because on TikTok, I always talk about the downfall of colonialism. And I've been talking about like all these things that will happen and all of that. And I was like, I could not have thought of a fucking more specifically relevant country to the shit that I'm talking about. And then I was like, oh, that's why I kept thinking about Boriken for so long, because for a while I was like, I'm a British UK babe. I have very little exposure to like Boricuas, let alone like wide in Latin America. Like, what the fuck? And then, you know, God does his thing. And then I was like, oh, this is why y'all have been so heavy on my mind. And again, if you look at the optics, right? Unfortunately, the rest of the world does not understand how much Borinque's human rights are violated, how they are abused, exploited. Generally, it's slavery. I don't know how else to put it, minus it is slavery and cultural genocide, right? And it has been such a beautiful journey to learn about Borinque, but also deeply fucking horrifying. And again, fuck the American empire all day, every day, right? But I think there is something so special in finally, after hundreds of years and after 100 and something odd years of American propaganda positioning Borinque to the rest of the world as like paradise on earth and like a happy neighbor to the to the United States through music. And But it's so smart because they can't censor music. And even if you censor it to the US, who cares? It's the rest of the world that's going to support Boriken. You're going to love the liberation video that I do for you astrologically, right? But like, it pierced it because in his songs, he's enlightening you about the realities of Boriken. He is telling you about the struggles. He's telling you about the current crises. And it's just so smart to me. Like, you see how God moves? So again, and the other thing is, when Sun is someone's a matti karaka, Sun is also politics. I really stand on this. Listen, I know when like Benito first come out, and I think people need to be a little bit more forgiving because it's youth. I talk openly, like I'm really happy none of you met me in my 20s because look at the nickname, Carefree Brown Girl. I had it since I was 17. I've always cared about liberation, but if you thought I could effectively and emotionally talk to you about that shit whilst not being distracted by the funness of life, you would be confused. Like it would not, but God is good, right? This will make sense when we look at the nakshatra that his sun is in. This boy is so coded by his ancestors or destiny or God to turn into an instrumental figure of change. And people forget, because colonizers love to rewrite history and all of that, music, art is so important when it comes to revolutions because it carries secrets and stories that the colonizers would burn or kind of censor out. It inspires and motivates people when they have a lack of belief. And I think there is something naturally just divine about music. So I've always felt like when people are gifted with the arts, it's so much bigger than just them. And I think it's just kind of learning how to use it in a way that it furthers you. And it can be authentic because, like, again, the thing is, he unapologetically not just does like reggaeton and like kind of like trap Latino music, but it's like he raps Boricua's culture so hard. And there is just a beauty for me. Because again, like, there's so much of Boricuas who get shamed and like, if you're not conservative, if you're not religious, like they get socially ostracized. So to like see him do it in such an unapologetic, real, original way, I'm like, this is exactly what decolonization looks like. And yeah, you might laugh at the kid and say like, oh, he's superficial, he's a celebrity, he's in this. Genuinely, fuck off. Because what other political figure, what other fucking activist? None. So if he's giving him the platform, give the kid time. I don't think you haven't even seen his best form yet. And it's actually so delightful. But I think the point that I was originally trying to make is Sun and Purva Bhadrapada also talks about someone feels the weight of their responsibilities and sometimes doesn't even think they're the adequate person to do the job. And I can say this shit with my chest. There could be no one better. Like, when God gives you something, use it well, you know? And so much beauty is going to come in the next 30 years. So it's just, it might look a bit different, but so what? That's the beauty of God. The magic happens the way it's meant to. So let's get into it, right? So his son's in a sign called Purva Bhadrapada. That's Aquarius type 7 to 9. Purva Bhadrapada is essentially known as a humanitarian. Two things immediately, right? Number one, the ruling deity of this sign, Ajay Iqbada, essentially goes on to build the world, which again, contextually, think about a liberated Puerto Rico and it being recognized as its own country and free of the nasty American empire. But it also basically has really low self-esteem. So again, like, this is what I mean. We are so hungry for revolutions, for liberation, for, I think, like, just to be free of the roots of colonialism, right? But when we get these figures, we don't support them the way that we should. I talked about this in a video I made earlier this year when I was talking about like different political parties, and there's a girl called Zara Satana. She left like the big kind of what we would see as like the left party in England, and the left is more like fascist now than it's ever been, and she was bullied for ages, and I was like, guys, she's being expelled and we're not supporting her, what the fuck? My girl then came back, opened up a socialist party, and I was like, if I told you all that we don't get enough behind it, then I have to role model it, right? And I have never in my life been more patriotic. That's it though. Then also, Purva Bhadrapada is an oddball. If there's one thing you should know about this man's chart, he is not destined to have a normal life or be a normal guy. And that is the most magical thing about it all, right? So you have that element. And again, Purva Bhadrapada belongs to this kind of energy. It essentially talks about the burning of old beliefs, a fiery transformation. So again, right, when you look at Bad Bunny's art, even in the stuff that people think is superficial, isn't very smart or whatever, actually is. For so long, the independence movement has been stifled by these really creepy, again, I don't think any of them are Boricuas. I think they are descendants of colonizers who have got too comfy with coasting on that fucking island, right? But essentially, they have kind of like metamorphosized into being like, if you don't turn up this way, if you're not A, B, and C, like you can't flourish. And it's like, but that attitude has created a bondage where we're stuck to the oppressors. We're not fulfilling our potential. We're letting them use our resources, use our land, use our people to prosper. But if it is us, why are we not prospering? Like, what the fuck? So I think there's something very radical in like just unfiltered expression. And I also think to see the joy it brings him and the realities of what it brings is refreshing. And that's what the youth need. There's a reason the youth love him, because he shows that you can let go of all these old fucking traditions and beliefs they try and tell us make us proud like Puerto Ricans, and we can redefine that. And we can burn away all those bondages. And I think that's exactly what this man is going to be ushering in the next 30 years, right? The other thing I want to talk about is Purva Bhadrapada is symbolized by two crossed swords. It actually talks about, it's not just like fighting and getting into it. It deals with the power of pen. So Maya Angelou and Martin Luther King are also Purva Bhadrapadas. They're actually some of my favorite examples of them, right? But it talks about the power of words. So again, I want you to think about timings now. So Saturn was going through the 9 types of Aquarius between 2023 and 2025. But this had a big impact on Benito because it's gone through, firstly, it's his sun, which we'll talk about in a sec, but it also passed through his Mercury, his Moon, his Mars, and his Saturn, right? So this is a time where when Saturn transits over, well, that many planets, but like just like our sun in particular, it's not inauspicious at all. What it talks about is the following. So number one, we feel very aware that we've outgrown our identity, or, you know, that costume is not fitting as well as it used to. Because to us, the soul just takes on different costumes, right? And again, at that time, I think Benito in 2023 announced that he was going to take a career pause because he had got all this fame, which was well-deserved. He was traveling a lot. Like, you know, he was ushering in his prosperity and doing what like he should do. But he mentally knew he just got to a place where he's like, I need to take a breather. Something about this is great and I love it deeply, but something's misaligned, and that's the best thing he could have ever fucking done, right? And now I want you to think about from 2023 all the way through 2024 until January 2025 when he released the album, which was when Saturn was going through the Aquarius nakshatras. In those 2 years before 2025, he was building this album. This album, his last album that he released, is the most political, is the most authentic, is the most, like, it tells the stories of Boriken and the Boricuas in such a beautiful way that, like, you couldn't make it up. Like, if that's not the ancestors working through someone, I don't know what the fuck is, right? But that's the thing. It's when Saturn came into his chart and it crossed over his identity, it gave him time to slow down. And often we think slowing down means we're losing something, things are fucking up. But no, that's fortifying something. That's redefining it. That's literally a chance to take all this wonderful wisdom and knowledge and lessons that you've learned and build it and apply it to something. And because he took that breather, because he gave him the space to think about, like, who is Benito growing up? And again, like, even think about when we met Benito and how he presents and how Benito looks now. And again, I have no doubt as Benito gets older, he'll take even even more inspirational personalities on, right? And a way of expressing himself. But that cross between Saturn over his sun, I think is like, because Saturn symbolizes like the reinforcement of karmas. I think that activated his destiny. Because it's like, okay, when he first came out, I remember there were so many critiques about like, oh, he's a mumbling rapper, he's this and he's that, right? And people, again, they were so unnecessarily mean. But when I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's because you literally don't like the fact that he shows what decolonization looks like. And you rather be shackled to your fucking oppressor than like actually taste, experience and dance to liberation. Like, you fuckers dream of a bigger jail cell. This babe desires freedom. You are not one of the same. And I think you're mad that like he even has like the spiritual and mental capacity to imagine that, to express that, right? Delicious, right? So again, my point was, Saturn's come over his sun sign, which is also his karmic career. What we see now, and it's so funny because he's going to start his 19-year Saturn transit around 2027. That's about 20 years, that transit, right? Boriken is going to be free within 30 to 35 years. Do you see how God is lining everything up? Like, think about it. Like, why do you think, like, he's always been successful, but don't you think it's something that in the album where he explores his feelings of being a Boricua, of belonging to Borinka, just like going through all the motions and hardships that the country is, right? That would be the album that globally, again, this is a UK babe who's making this video, not only cements his success, but tells a story of his people and their struggles in a way that we haven't seen before. Because we also, at some point in future videos, when we talk about the liberation of Borinke, we will have to talk about the fetishization, the romanticization of the people in the land. And also, I don't want you to forget, it's happening in the first year where the American empire finally crumbles and goes into its downfall era. You see how God works? But yeah, again, Saturn can mature us and it can make someone feel more steady, right? And he crafted that album with so much love, with so much like emotion too. Purva Bhadrapada is a very emotional sign, right? And it deals with dark, complex feelings. It deals with like, do you know what Purva Bhadrapada is? If I could summarize it. It's this type of energy that they would give their last dollar to a cause that they cared about. And you cannot like imagine a better expression of this energy, right? So again, think about the last album, right? The entire album is a celebration of his journey from his small hometown in Puerto Rico to the top of the world, right? Think about some of the tracks. They not just flaunt his success. In the album, he's literally saying his success is not a personal achievement, but it's a victory for his entire culture. He's a kid from Boriken who like sets global trends. And it's like, it's such a powerful political actor. Like, he's decolonizing success. Like, he's showing you that if you don't know, a lot of the things that keeps the people Boriken, I think, in bondage to the United States is they have this really big fear that they financially would be fucked up or not stable without them. So to leave is to basically kill the island, which you're going to love the video when it comes. It's the complete opposite. The second you reject your colonizers, the wealth that comes into the country, you have no idea, Boricuas. You have no fucking idea. We just got to break that bondage for you, right? And I think like he's showing you in real time, because again, the Americans run a lot of propaganda and instill a lot of fear. They intentionally try and bully the Boricuas and Borinke to staying submissive to them. And all of that shit. But he in that whole album and the success, God bless, of this album and the way he has portrayed it, the fact that he hasn't done anything in fucking English, he's done everything authentically to his people, to his language, to his culture. That is the biggest statement of decolonization, because he's showing you that we can have success without the Americans. And on my fucking life, the fact this is happening 2 years before his Saturn transit kicks in, It happened as he got his first big taste of Saturn again. God. That is God, you know? Even then, if you look at here, back of his album, it says this project is dedicated to the Puerto Ricans all around the world. And then there's another stamp on it that goes from Puerto Rico to the world. So it's literally him emphasizing like Boriken is ready to speak. We want to tell our stories, right? And then even think of the fucking radical act of not touring the US. Every other fucking like ethnic artist is always gagging to get America's approval, which I honestly like suck my like ovaries. I could not give two fucks, right? Do you know how powerful it's saying? He's like, we're not going to the US. Like his 30-day residency in Boriken brought in like over like hundreds of millions of dollars. And the world came. He didn't go to the world came to Boriken for the Boricua. Use your head. Like, what kind of divine act do you think that is, right? And also, one thing I really rated is, I think the first 9 days, he said the ticket sales were only for the Puerto Rican people who lived on the island. That's what decolonization looks like, people. And that's what I'm talking about. The thing is, I will never understand. We have bondages to really shit celebrity and like reality stars when artists like this exist. And in the way they express their art, they live their lives, they build like, you know, the business around their artistry, they're showing you, and this is what the next chapter is about. And I want you to pay attention to, why do you think God would give these people a certain platform, a certain impact, and at the time that we do? And also, I cannot emphasize this enough. In the next like 19 years, well, it'll be 21 in total if you count the 2 years leading Saturn. This is a man that's going to be a legend, and he's going to be certified as a legend, not just because this is a guy that creates all the music that like speaks to our feelings, you know, the lusty ones, the flexy ones, the fun ones. It's because this was the artist who created the music and stand in solidarity with the Boricuas who got the liberation for Boriken. That's it. Do you know I always said to you earlier, God is always preparing us for what we're going to do in the long term? In 2019 or 2020, and again, my Spanish is so shit, I get so nervous about speaking it publicly. I'm sorry. But the line in English, so basically, I think around then, Boriken ousted a like governor who essentially was like bought by the Americans and was not helping the people. And they did it peacefully. They didn't even do it violently, but that's a big flex too, the fact that you can intimidate someone out. He released a song, and his song was actually used for that movement. Because again, the whole problem with Boriken getting its liberation, it keeps getting stopped by puppets. And again, Borinquas who have forgotten like their roots and their ancestors and align with their oppressors, right? But like, the song was used for a movement, and the biggest line in that song, he goes, "What good is a governor if he can be bought for $1?" And I was thinking, like, at that time, that song blew up so much for different Borinquas across the world and their feelings about their liberation and reclaiming their agency. So I was like, you wouldn't think that, like, yeah, like, God's gonna go, yeah, in 6 years later, when I put you through the Saturn energy, which is essentially of legacy, of longevity, and like a deeper reflection and dissolving illusions. What you did with that little one song there and the one line there, we're going to do an album. And once you do that album and your heart sees and you feel that connection to your art again, then I'll prepare you for the next thing. But I want you to think, what do you think the next thing is, Hibiscus is? In fact, before we move on to his other Aquarius placements, let me walk you through some of the political lines in his latest album so you can get a taste of what's to come. And also you can understand Boriken's struggles. Because again, this fine babe is leading the babes to revolution. And we love to see it over here. So one thing you should know is when I was designing like the research notes for this video, I was listening to all his albums non-stop because I was like, I want it to be spiritual as fuck. So I was like, just channel the energy, right? And then his latest album is my favorite. It's a close tie between another one, but I wrote down a few examples of lines where I was like, oh, I don't thing is, it's political, but the way he does it is so casual, and that's what I think the liberation needs to look like. It's just this hardcore understanding of this is reality and this is what we're doing, instead of like, there's something different in dreaming versus speaking and doing, right? So the first one where that you can tell it's proper political is, I think it's track 11. It's called Dorista, right? And let me just grab my notes. He has a line in it which translates to the following: in my life, you were a Taurus. You only saw the best of me and not when I was suffering. You left without knowing the why, the reason for my wound. They weren't yours to heal. You came to have a good time and we had a good time. So in it seems like he's talking about love, which he also is, because Rohini, babe, of course, the love, the romance is there. We love it, right? But also he's talking about these fucking degenerate fucks who keep like bombarding Boriken with tourism, exploiting their land, being so rude to the people, fucking up their wildlife, fucking up their agriculture because they think they're entitled. And like, it's really devious if you think about it. And I feel so ashamed for not knowing about Boriken the way, like, I only learned about it in 2025. Is that not really fucking shameful, right? And now I look at it and I'm like, oh, if you ever need a big mouthpiece, I'll use it. Like, because I think this is also sometimes the beauty in it. When I was like listening to his music and unpacking like what it means for him to be a Boricua, and all of that, I felt so much of the struggles of being like a Punjabi babe. And like Punjab, my country, is occupied, right? And it's the same stuff with that happened with Boriken, happened with us. And like, honestly, I cried so much when I was like putting together notes. But it's that whole thing of like, you love our arts, you love our culture, you love our food. So for instance, a lot of the things that you guys think are Indian are actually Punjabi. They appropriate us. They like split our land in half. The Brits did. We were the guinea pig for what they did to Palestine, if you wanted a comparison. That's what it means to be Punjabi in Punjab. And we also have dickheads who forgot like our ancestors and who we came from. And they're just embarrassing. Everything's deeply embarrassing, right? But people will love our music. They will flood the country, or they'll want to wear the clothes. They obviously like the fucking religions and stuff. But they don't understand the pain. And that pain is still very real. Like, we are culturally genocided. We are systematically genocided. We are quite literally and physically genocided. So I think when I was looking at it, I was like, it's a really weird place to be when everybody fetishizes you, romanticizes you, wants you, cosplays as you, but also like wounds you, you know? And doesn't recognize your struggles, or they just think the way things are, you're happy to accept, and they're not understanding like the violence that's happening in the background, because for them, it's not theirs. It's a fleeting moment in time. Whereas for us, like, it's really deep wounds. There was also a line in, I think it's track 13, you know, the Christmas song one. Essentially, he has a line that goes, "You're bad, you left me like the light." So again, romance, but not really. So in Boriken, after the storm, where they were fucking left to defend for themselves and rehabilitate themselves, if you didn't know, when the Americans took over, one of the first acts they did was to privatize a lot of the energy companies, the water companies, and all of that. Now, that has now made energy, basically electricity, unaffordable for a lot of Boricuas. But also, a lot of Boricuas can't get access to having their lights on. They go like 4 or 5 days at a time without like the ability to like put their showers on, have electricity. But meanwhile, you'll have these grotesque American tourists and all these other degenerate fucks visiting the country and having their time of life in their hotels, whilst you're literally surrounded by other people who can't even go and cook their own food. Like, then he also talks about, in another song, I think, what is it? It goes, "Nukuera ira pa Orlando, pero la corrupto lauku." Leku? Which I think basically translates into English, he didn't want to go Orlando. So, he didn't want to go Orlando, but the scoundrel pushed him. Spanish are going in, okay. So again, he's talking about like how Puerto Ricans by force had to migrate to New York for 3 things, and this is what people don't really consider. Number one, The only reasons they gave the Boricuas passports is to use them for bodies and essentially army meat. Because what is America? It's a demonic bloodhound, which is an industrial military complex. So literally to seduce them into wanting to join their armies, they were like, we'll give you a passport. Number 2, they rob the land, and essentially the land is still very prosperous. The country is really prosperous. The people are incredibly talented and skilled. But essentially the Americans put in like loads of different boundaries and stops and structures and stealing so they could extract the wealth, but not the people. So it's forced them to flee their land and essentially think like there's not economic opportunities where it can't be prosperous, when the truth is it's highly prosperous, but the Americans are picking up the money. As always, the Americans. And thirdly, I was thinking about, I think he's talking about, because at some point, again, fun lore about me, whilst you may not think surface level, I've had a lot of exposure to Latinos. You go actually used to visit Miami quite regularly. I told you I've been outside. There's a different side of me. No, I used to go there for work, but not that kind of work. But I think because I unfortunately was in America when they elected Trump the first time, and if you told me 10 years later I'd be talking about Trump and how to dethrone him via my cultural like background and religious practices, I would have laughed. But I remember the year that I went, there was like this big research project that came out because loads of races came out where they said officially like 1 million Boricuas were living in Florida. But essentially it's because they had fucked up Boriken so much. And then on top of that, the storms where the Boricuas were not, they were not helped to kind of rehabilitate and save the land. It forced people out for economic reasons to go and find work elsewhere and like send that money back home to rebuild it. Right. And then likewise, Boriken, like the rest of us, has really fucking corrupt politicians that will beg for our votes, but just steal the money and not pour it back into people. So again, you look at this guy and I don't know, like maybe you don't take him seriously. Maybe you think like, I don't know, whatever your weird, hateful things are. But I'm like, but in real time, like an activist, no? And also an activist that's speaking to the whole fucking world and gathering you support. It will add up eventually, right? Then there was another line that I saw. Where is it? Oh, there was one, I can't remember it, but there was a line he said about flags. And then when I was like talking on TikTok, because I was like, I really wanted my liberation video for Boriken to be shaped by Boricuas themselves and their knowledge and their help, they were telling me 3 things. So number 1, there used to be a unified flag amongst Caribbean countries to basically get out colonizers. So they were like, he could be talking about that. Then number 2, it was, Boriken actually had its own flags, but the Americans made them burn it and put in their own flag instead. And they used to like pick people up off the street and do weird shit to them if they were seen carrying the flag. And then also they were talking about the flag is basically coming back because the Caribbean countries are longing for independence. So he could also be talking about that. And I was like, oh, cheers, guys. And then where's the other one? He talks a lot about he's enjoying the things that people miss. And the thing that's really beautiful, obviously at the time of writing this, he would have never known, but astrologically, we're in the downfall of colonialism. The next few years are actually marked by, we'll say, a wave of the babies recollecting to the motherland. And it looks different for different places, but colonizers are going to have a hard time exploiting because the power dynamics about to get really different, right? And even in that song, I think he says, I wish my people would never move, which, I mean, he's good for the power of the word. So call it in, honey, call it in. Oh, that was it. Oh, I think I would have cried. He has this one line where he says, if I die, I hope you never forget my face. And then you play one of my songs when they bring hostels back. So basically, if you don't know, Hostos died in the Dominican Republic. And he wanted to return to Puerto Rico when it gained its independence. So sweet. And then even that, like, the last example I had, he goes like, nobody can take me out of here. I'm not going anywhere. Tell them this is my house where my grandfather was born. Like, I'm from P fucking R. Sorry, I didn't want to mess up my makeup. I have a really ugly crying face. I don't think I'm one of those beautiful babes that cry that looks like, well, I might look euphoric, but I don't wish for anybody to really see that. But my point is, right, between his rising sign and we're only on his sun sign, do you see what God writes over us? So even if we start one way, and again, this is someone who is dispositioned to be an unorthodox man, expressive man, a lover boy, for sure, a loving babe, a flirty babe, a packing babe. But there's a depth to it. And all you got to do is let time do its thing and be connected to self. And the more you're connected to self, your ancestors work through you. Again, that's something that we've just gone through was his Amatyakaraka, his karmic career. You couldn't write it. Like, he so effortlessly, and I'm sure to him it doesn't feel effortless. I'm sure it feels scary, complicated, a lot to think about, a lot of pressure. Yeah, like I don't underplay that at all. But I think like he should be damn proud. And I also think this should deeply inspire you. Because do you know the thing I was thinking about before we move on to his other Aquarius placements? Purva Bhadrapada is often symbolized by a man with two faces, so they point different directions. So it looks about not being like two things. So one man is looking into the past, but it deals with not being nostalgic, but also learning the lessons and taking the wisdom and applying it to the present and not looking too much into the future that you don't do the work in the present. And then also it talks about the complexities in identity, right? So people often think Purva Bhadrapas are going to be two-faced. It's not that. Again, you have to think about, so with our astrology, it's a religious practice, right? And the thing is, it's basically existed since the fucking Bronze Age. So the work of our spiritual practitioners, oh my God, that includes me, right? It is to essentially keep it alive to that current ancestral line, those current generations. And this is the way I look at it now, right? The thing about colonialism is, all it is a financial venture to exploit wealth. And it does this through creating divisions in identity, because when it makes it more complicated for you to be yourself, you feel weirder about resisting, about fighting back, about reclaiming, about redefining. But this is one thing I want you to really always take seriously, and I hope it helps. If you look at any kind of culture, particularly indigenous cultures, before any kind of colonizer comes, they will have loads of different expressions of gods. And it's not to say that there's one god or many gods or anything like that, but it talks about the nature of God is to be diverse. We are designed to have multiple different expressions. So as we go through life, when different situations arise, God has designed a persona for us to have victory in it. And often when we put people into a mindset that you can only be one or the other, that severing of the identity, which also mirrors the severing of victims of oppression to their cultures, to their knowledge, their understanding of the world, is a violent act to keep them sick and to make them like slaves. Bada boom, bada bing. And on that note, let's talk about his moon, Mars, and Saturn, which all sit in a sign called Shatabishka, which is Aquarius type 4 to 6, I think, or 3 to 6. And fun fact, is ruled by Varuna, the Vedic god of justice. Take a deep sip of that jar, ladies and gentlemen. There's more to discuss. Oh no, my battery's dying. I'm so sorry, hibiscuses. We're going to have to power through this now. So, number one, Shatabishka is the power to heal. And Shatabishka is also associated to TV, film, entertainment, but also spirituality, hidden knowledge, hidden truths. When you look at Moon is the way that you are emotionally processing the world. He understands again, when he heals himself, it gives him the ability to speak and I think inspire and connect with a bunch of other people. You cannot minimize the impact and the connection that the generations have to him, because he embodies the words that speak to the pains that they often have to conceal or do not have the words for, right? The other thing is, when you look at this combination of Moon, Mars and Saturn in Shatabishka, because Varuna does symbolize like the god of delivering justice, it talks about the individual is going to learn how to fight its own wars. So, Boringa's liberation comes from the people and not the reliant on the puppets and the politicians that the American colonizers instill. And the other thing I thought was so beautiful, it deals with, it removes the demons that stop the lotus flower from blossoming or the person reaching its full potential. I have so much more to say about Bad Bunny's future, but I genuinely think, right, in him becoming more comfortable with his identity and learning how to feel more comfortable to speak his truth, and just everything that he is slowly but surely growing into, that healing energy really gives the spirit the energy for other Boricuas to know you can take control. And we don't have to stay in this manufactured state of sickness, weakness, and dependency. We are so much more than that, right? The other thing is Shatabishka is really, really related to ancestors. The knowledge is guided by the ancestors, and it's knowledge or words or, whatever gifts they bestow on you that help you win over demons or the thing that's harming you. Think about contextually everything we've discussed. Don't you think it's so fucking cool, right? The other thing is, one of the symbols for Shatabishka is 100 stars. So it talks about not only working for the good of others, but really the best things in life come from unity. So we can either look at that through the lens of, number one, in the future, he can become a figure that's more involved in the racism that really poisons Boricuas from flourishing, and again, unite the fractured parts of the Boringe people to essentially have unity and solidarity, which basically dissolves the Americans' power. And likewise, oust whatever these weird descendants of the colonizers are who think they have a fucking right to dictate the future of people that you caused immense suffering to. Number two, I think it talks about his ability to connect to different cultures around the world and not just have global solidarity, but show that they understand our pain, we understand their pain, and when we work together, bada boom, bada bing. And then I think thirdly, it's that classic thing of when I shine, we all shine. How fitting, right? Now, the thing that I really want to focus on is Shatabishka itself definitely has very complex emotions, because there's an understanding. So one of the symbols is a circle that has a dark abyss. But what it's talking about is internally, Shatabishkas are my favorite nakshatra. I want to emphasize that. It's my favorite energy of all time, because they're the Anthony Bourdains of the world. They're very cool. They're very cultured. They're super nice. They're very creative. It's just, it's delightful energy to be around, right? And they're super honest people. But the thing with Shatabishkas is, and it's one of their biggest weaknesses, they could be going through hell on earth internally. You would never know. That's unfortunately in Shatabishka, particularly Shatabishka men. Look at Anthony Bourdain. Who else? Look at Robin Williams, the comedian. Some of the most happiest, delightful, entertaining people on the planet. Both men committed suicide. That's how deep the struggle is, right? And it's just because they feel like their demons are too ugly. They don't want people to feel burdened by them and all of that. So that's why I really emphasize hibiscuses. As and when we are, experiencing these figures, it's a two-way street. If they talk about our experiences and they speak to it, we got to back them some. And it has to be, give and take. It can't just be all the pressure on one person. And then, when it's time to rally behind them, you leave them to places of vulnerability and destruction. That's not right. And again, Shatabishka deals a lot with mental health. And I was thinking about how much Benito has emphasized his journey with depression, mental pressure, exhaustion, and how powerful this is when we talk about removing the poisons of our colonizers and oppressors, right? So again, Puerto Rico's history under Spanish and the American colonialists created a culture where displays amongst the Boricua people of vulnerability, especially men, I would say, were often seen as weaknesses, right? So that's actually how you end up with the horrible stereotype that like Latin men are macho and this. No, it's not natural. They were forced to be tough and resilient because they were fucking violating them, killing them, and doing atrocities to their people and their land, right? And that's what forms a rigid code of masculine behavior that emphasizes that, you know, Latino men or Afro-Latino men should be stoic, they should be suppressing their emotion, and they need to be self-reliant. They should never be asking for help. By a global Boricua superstar saying, I'm not okay, I'm getting help, I'm prioritizing my safety, my mentalness, I'm dipping into my spiritual practices because I need to regenerate, he directly challenges these oppressive norms that the colonizers have kept a grip over people, right? He models that strength isn't about silence, it's about seeking care. So number one, right? He integrates mental health into his art. So he doesn't just talk about mental health in interviews, he makes it a central theme in his music. And that is a shit that really resonates with the millions of young fans he has directly. So think about his albums like, is it, what's it called? El Umatio Tor Demando. Oh, I fucked that up, didn't I? But basically, that album and other albums are filled with lyrics about loneliness, paranoia, the emptiness of fame, and the emotional turmoil. He makes mental health struggles a relatable part of a human experience, not a hidden shame. Which, again, when we talk about unrooting colonialism, again, colonialism operates by imposing control and silencing certain narratives. So for decades, the mental health toll on people who are victims of colonialism, and that, you know, that looks like economic hardship, disaster trauma from hurricanes, political powerlessness. For the Boricuas, it's a private burden, and it need not be. It should be an international talking point, right? But by putting these feelings of anxiety and disillusionment into chart-topping songs, Benito brings marginalized experiences into the mainstream. He gives a voice to the Boricuas' collective anxiety of generations growing up, especially in post-Maria, what it means to economically struggle in Puerto Rico, and it validates their feelings as a legitimate response to their reality, and again, why they should go for liberation. Number 3, he redefines masculinity through actions, not just words. So Bad Bunny's entire persona is a rejection of toxic masculinity. He wears skirts, nail polishes, cries on shame, expresses a full spectrum of emotions publicly. That's a defiance of gender norms, right? And the defiance of gender norms is directly linked to people's mental health. And again, toxic masculinity is a huge barrier, particularly when it comes to men seeking psychological help or like emotional well-being. So again, why it's amazing is the following. The hyper-masculine macho ideal self is a colonial import. It's been reinforced over the decades by these fucking sick exploitative fucks. So by embracing emotional fluidity and vulnerability, Benito is engaging in an act of decolonization. He's helping to strip away a layered identity imposed by oppression, and he's helping the Boricua, especially the youth, especially like young men, define themselves in their own terms and not through the lens of the oppressor. When a figure who's both the epitome of fucking like dead ass cool and unabashedly like proud to be a Boricua, it shows a range of emotion. It gives permission for entire generations to do the same, freeing them from being a colonial and patriarchy victim, essentially. And the long-term impacts of colonialism is essentially the destruction of self, and he's replenishing them. So in summary, I think when you look at Bad Bunny and all the different expressions he has, I just think he's a revolutionary because he's using his platform not just to entertain, but to heal. And like, whether he's addressing mental health, imperialism, colonialism, fighting against transphobia, gender-based violence, he's basically actively like chopping down the shitty poison of like colonial impact. because like he's normalizing seeking help instead of staying silent about all the fucking oppression and shit that they've been through. He's articulating the collective anxiety that they don't get to speak about amongst themselves or with people. And he's dismantling all the bullshit. Like, what's not to love, right? And again, like, he's done that all the Saturn's going through Aquarius. So it's been super duper beautiful in how he's addressed it. The other thing I was thinking about, Moon, Saturn and Mars in Shatabishka makes a person addicted to work. This is one of his downfalls. Not downfall in a bad way, but I think also his work is an escapism for him. When we look at his house placements, the boy definitely goes through emotional turmoil. He definitely feels lonely, but this, you know, we all have our private battles. Also makes him hella spiritual. So we'll talk about this in other videos, but his chart is deeply mystical, and I genuinely think the ancestors are working through him. And if I had a message to any of the Borinkes, it would be the following. Start doing ancestral worship again. Start reconnecting to your spiritual practices, however that looks and feels for you. That energy is beautifully gonna drive you in the coming decades. The bondage to Christianity is not helping anybody, right? And again, when we look at Shatabishka, which is this mixture of like healing, justice, uncovering hidden knowledge, I just think like it perfectly summarizes how through art he heals, he makes their causes known globally, and he's bringing in karma and justice. He really is. And also, Shatabishka, a huge activist. I truly think you guys are not ready for it, but in the next 30 years, my guy Benito's going to look very, very different. And Benito will still be fun and all of that, but everything happens in waves. And I think next is coming a tsunami. Let's just quickly look at his Mercury, right? So the last planet that he has in Aquarius is his Mercury in Dhanishta. That's Aquarius type 1 to 2. Mercury is like communication, right? Dhanishta is a power to bring fame and recognition. It's symbolized by Shiva, who essentially is playing a flute, but also doing the dance of destruction. He is so coded, not only to be like, you know, seen by a lot of people, but the actual perception of him and the love of him comes from liberations of the people, from destroying all the shit, all the norms, all the poisons, all the barriers that they have placed on them, right? All the stigmas, all the stereotypes wiped out. And the other thing I was thinking is the Nisha is even symbolized by musical instruments. So it deals a lot with following like God's rhythm instead of forcing things. I wonder if he feels more at peace that now his art is influenced by stuff that like, you know, maybe something a little bit deeper and meaningful to him. And also God is quite literally using him as an instrument of liberation. Now sip your jar and think about that. Next, we have is Jupiter and Vishaka. So you guys would know that as Libra type 7 to 9. So Jupiter and Vishaka basically talks about someone who will guide others through a revolution, because Vishaka means the one who enters heaven. And also it's ruled by Indra, who's the chief of gods. And again, Indra in our religious scriptures is always involved in like different battles, conquering over demons, complex wars. So when you put that all together, it definitely shines a certain way, right? Now, the one thing I thought was really interesting is Vishaka enters heaven once it's gone through like a deep psychological transformational change. So then what I was thinking about, and this is more personal to Bad Bunny, I think, is when he's younger and you look at his art, it's very much, it's an expression of like his personal experiences, his love, his romance, his doubts, his anxieties, his insecurities, his confidence, right? And then he goes through the motions of that. And he learns lessons, as we all do when we get into our 30s, about like what stuff is, But then at some point he realizes it's not just about Benito anymore, right? I have this big platform. I have this big voice. For whatever reason, I have these eyes on me. I need it to be more meaningful, And I'm sure it was always been meaningful, but the legacy of this man is not just going to come from Bad Bunny. He even now, I don't know if he's gone through it in private, but there are immense changes he's going to go through. And I would not sleep on this boy's ability to become a really big cultural figure to that liberation movement, And also Vishaka does a lot with Loverboy energy. But one weakness about this man's chart is potentially falling in love with the wrong figures. I was going to say, and maybe we talk about it, we'll keep it respectful because we can't talk in people's private lives like that. He has to be wary of gringos or Puerto Ricans who aren't really Puerto Ricans. They'll sell out the liberation or do something that compromises him and fucks up his ability to like keep bringing attention to liberation. I actually think he hasn't met his life partner yet, but I think he'll see the babe soon. Oh, I think the babe might also be a foreigner. The babe will deepen his sense of politics, spirituality, and his creativity. Huh. Nice. Next, we're going to look at his Venus in Uttarpadra. Uttarpadra is Pisces type 2 to 5. 2 to 5. And currently, Saturn's now in Pisces after going through Aquarius. So long story short, Uttarpadra is essentially about ancestral karmas, the blessings, the curses, and it also deals with generational wealth. This is what I think. So again, Venus is music, it's art, it's beauty, it's romance, it has all that, right? But it's also unconventionality, a little bit provocative, a little bit naughty, all of that. So 3 things. Number 1, he will create a different future for the Boricuas through music and through his actions, right? Number 2, when I say like building generational wealth, it's not just a case of like this becomes a wealthy person. No, there's something around the way he manages his wealth that restores the agriculture, that helps the economy and like, I'm going to say economic equalities within Puerto Rico. And then thirdly, it's really sweet because the deity for this sign is essentially like a cosmic pillar for the universe. So it's a pillar of support. He probably feels the weight of this a lot, actually. But in due time, in unconventional ways, he really becomes such a pillar of support for the movement and liberation. And when certain voices are silenced, he can still speak. But he has to be careful. There's going to be really sneaky people around him that try to like distract him or take him off the path of liberation. And then finally, we have his Rahu and Ketu, which are the karmic axes. Sorry if I'm going through this so quickly now, guys. I can literally see my battery about to die. So one thing is Rahu is his Atmakaraka, right? Which is the soul's highest priority in this reincarnation. Really easy. He was predestined to be famous. His career was going to be a huge part of his identity, but it's because he's so bold and different in his career. And his career would always be linked to something provocative and political. We haven't touched on his family's life, but Benito, Benito is like really, really loving and caring, but I don't think like he's had many good people around him. I think he's been betrayed a lot. Also, he's here to burn off a lot of ancestral karma and create more ancestral blessings for the future generations. Bada boom, bada bing. And Rahu Makaraka means they don't start flourishing until they get into their 30s. He literally only just turned 30 or 31. You ain't seen nothing yet. Then on top of that, his Rahu's in a sign called Anuradha, that's Scorpio type 2 to 5, One, Anuradha's ruled by Mithra, who's known as literally the divine friend. He becomes such a support figure in unorthodox, unconventional ways. Anuradha also deals with spirituality, music, arts, entertainment, dancing. Number 3, Anuradha also is symbolized by a lotus flower. So think about a lotus flower. When it begins life, it's literally a really rough looking seed in the middle of dirt, no light. And for some reason, even though it can't see light, it keeps pushing up through the layers of mud. And then eventually it becomes this beautiful flower. And that flower represents peace, prosperity, enlightenment, art, beauty, like spirituality. But we never understand how rough that journey is. And the lotus flower also goes through so many deaths. So it shows so many identities. Long story short, he brings the beauty back to the Boriken people. He goes through loads of identity changes, but it makes him more liberated and more powerful and peaceful in himself. Is there anything else I have? Oh, Radha is Krishna's soulmate, which is his rising sign. He hasn't met his soulmate yet, but when he meets this babe, he completely evolves. He will have a really, really like romantic love, and it will be very inspirational. But she's gonna be they are gonna be a foreigner. Oh, do you know what? Let me leave it alone. Not my business. But he has to be careful. He has a little bit of energy on his chart where it shows people can try and manipulate him. So he needs to be careful of people who pose as friends but have darker motives. Then we have his Ketu. His Ketu, basically your past lives, what you've been up to, why you end up in the position you do, what's do more or less of. His Ketu's in a sign called Kritika. You guys will know that's Taurus type 1 to 3. Long story short, 3 things. In a past life, he has been a warrior or revolutionary, and he's always been really gifted at words. This time, he will use... I actually think it's very likely he could have been a revolutionary before in Boriken, and now he's come back to basically finish the job, and ironically, he will. Number 2, always been a lover boy. He has personal lessons when it comes to not confusing love and lust, and we'll leave it there. And thirdly, you know, it's ruled by Agni, who's a messenger of the gods and also the power to sacrifice and purify. He will liberate so many generations of the people from like a mental bondage that keeps them dreaming of statehood, and he will influence them to go for liberation and be a huge support. Now, saying all that, because my battery's about to die, I'm so sorry. We have to speed run through everything now. So here is his house placement. So I'm just going to tell you high level what I see, and then I'm going to have to love and leave you. Number 1, Ketu is in the first house. He will leave a legacy around liberation, around spicy speech, and love away 101. Jupiter's in the 6th house. Jupiter in the 6th house shows he will get behind huge political movements. He has to be careful because the opposition will send fake friends or do something to silence him. Also in the 2000s and 30s, they might try and assassinate him or really slow him down for getting any more exposure to the liberation movement. So you have to protect this person. He's going to get more politically engaged the older he gets. Like, he's going to be really involved. Also, great fashion taste. Number 7, Rahu's in the 7th house. He brings in international attention and solidarities with other communities, and actually helps. Once Boriken has its liberation, you guys are going to have new contracts with other countries that will make you prosperous and take out the rot stealing from America. He can be a huge help in like ambassador work or calling in certain business and companies and all of that. Then he has Mercury, Mars, Moon, Saturn and Sun in the 10th house. 10th house is government, 10th house is career. I have a few things. So number 1, obviously that cements his place as a healing artist who only gets better with age, but his art changes a lot with age also. I don't think he's going to step away from music completely, but I also would be open, or you should be open, to Benito maybe moving away from Bad Bunny a little bit and showing you a different side to him. And that work of his, I think you'll be more in love with, believe it or not, right? Also, he'll care a lot for the youth. I don't know if he'll adopt, but he will get involved a lot when it comes to like children's programs, schooling, education. At some point, he's going to have a lot to do with agriculture, rehabilitating it, helping farmers get their rights, all of that. He has to be very, very careful around certain people. There are loved ones that really betray Benito, either try and steal money or use him, but he has to be very, very careful around these people. And then finally, Venus is in the 11th house. When this man meets his babe, it's completely going to change him. He's going to become more spiritual. He's going to become more artistic, but the revolutionary in him activated. But he has to be careful. Sometimes he gets wrapped up in the wrong honeys. But that'll be a lesson for himself, right? Other than that, I hope that was helpful. I'm so sorry that was so chaotic. I thought I planned this video well, but in hindsight, there's so many more things I wanted to say. What I'll do is I'll put in a little presentation slide now to go through any points that I missed out. But I hope that motivated you. I hope that inspired you. And we have so many more interesting things to talk about. And just know the way he unconsciously has done everything and intentionally now will start doing everything that comes forward. The same applies to you. Okay? Bye, hibiscuses.
Takida